Have you ever wanted to create a random starting point for an object, or maybe make your game just a little more unique with random? So we've got 4 objects here. Rather than having them start in the same location, we can have them go to random positions. And so the logic took a little second there. Red and blue don't look random, but they are. And if we hit reset, you can see it chooses random locations every single time. And we can do that over and over and over again. So every time someone loads in for a new session, they're going to get a brand new game. And so this is pretty cool. See how they're just completely, like, this feels like a pattern, but that is what random usually does, is it creates patterns. Now keep in mind, with 4 objects like this, there's only 16. And what's up with this guy? Yellow must be the chosen color. So in addition to showing you how to make something like this where you can go to 4 different positions, I'm also going to show you how you can make it go to one of 4 positions. So if you only have a single object and you want to go to 4 different positions, because just as I was saying, with 4 objects going to 4 positions, it can kind of feel, there's only 16. 4 different objects times 4 different locations means there's only 16 possibilities. And with there only being 16 possibilities, you're going to feel like it's a pattern, or that there's been less random than you'd want. So in this instance, you could have substantially more, because you'd have not just 4 locations, you could have 16 locations, 4 for each object. So say green has its own 4 locations and yellow has its own 4 locations. You could do that as well. And so that gives you a much more random scope. So let's go ahead and start by looking at how to create numerous random locations. And so the first thing you're going to need is an object like this pyramid we've got here. So our pyramid starts in the world here, and we've got 4 positions, which are just triggers that are inactive. And so those just assign positions. You could also type in a vector location inside the script. So you can see random value is just a number used inside the script. So we'll see that in a moment. But then it chooses one of those positions to jump to, and it goes there. And so if you ran this code on every single object, it's going to go to a different position. I would not recommend using the same triggers for multiple objects, because then you're not going to get this sort of like they all went to unique positions. You're going to have some overlap, and that's not ideal. So first of all, this script is very simple. When the world started, we assign a random value. And so random value is just a number variable, and then we set it to be between 0 and 4. Please note that this is exclusive of 4, but inclusive of 0. So this means it'll be 0, 1, 2, or 3, but not 4. So it gives us 4 different possibilities, and that correlates to our 4 positions. So theoretically, you could actually create this for multiple, like way more than 4. If you wanted to. Then we send my event to self after 15 seconds. That was just a joke to show you it appearing out of nowhere. But you'd want to set it to about 0.1 or 0.2 seconds. So that way it has enough time for this random value to be set before running the next event. And then in our next event, we're going to check this value to see what is it. So if it's a 0, 1, 2, or 3, we run separate if statements. And then as you can see, this is just moving to the position of an object on self, because we're running on the pyramid object itself. And to get that position of object, you just go to your operations, scroll down to about halfway through, and object transform has position of object, and then you create an object variable, you tag it to the trigger, and that'll use that object as the position. Otherwise, you could use a vector location and then find out what the vector location is in your world, and that's another great way to do this, which requires less objects and therefore is also less intense on your capacity. So there's a couple options for you there. But now what if we want to have 4 objects that always go to these 4 locations? In that case, it's a little bit more complicated. So we've got our control object here. And from inside our control object, what you're going to notice is there are 4 positions, just as before. These are also just trigger objects that are held. There they are. And then we have the 4 objects themselves tagged. So we have to tag all 4 objects. And then we have the amount of objects listed. So you'll see how that number variable is used. You don't need to type it inside of here. It's used just in the script. Then we've got an object in motion, which I'll show you how that works as well in the script, as well as these 4 booleans. And those are also used in the script. So let's go take a look. What is happening over here? Well, when the world is started, we're sending event next object to self with a number of 0.1 seconds. So again, that delay isn't actually necessary, but it's nice to be able to adjust it as you need, so if you don't want it to happen immediately on world start. But the other cool thing here is if you wanted to reset this, you could go ahead and reset your booleans, these 4 booleans, to false, and then send next object once again, just to this object, the control object, and you could reset these positions like after the game finishes, just to kind of reset the world state. It's not super difficult. So then, when next object is received, we send event to move object to self with a delay of 0.1 seconds. This 0.1 second delay gives us time to go through this, but sending this event first allows us to cancel sending the event, and you'll see how that's important in just a moment. So now, if the total objects equals 4, remember that's that number variable that's set to 4 at the beginning, then we're going to set object in motion to object 1. So remember, object in motion is kind of a blank object that we fill in with the other 4 objects. So now we've set it to be object 1, and then when that's done, we go and set a random value to be between 0 and 4. So that's that same random value we saw in the previous script, but in this case, we're going to be changing it every single time. So we set the random value to be between 0 and 4. When the move object is received, so remember at the very beginning of this, we sent move object to self with a delay of 0.1 seconds. When the move object is received, if the random value is a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, doesn't matter which, they're pretty much all the same type of code. When random value equals 0 and the Boolean representative of this position is false, which it starts in a false state, then we will first start by setting that Boolean to be true, which then allows us to stop running this command. We know that the object is in that position. We no longer want to put any other objects in this position. And then we move to the position 1 on the object in motion. If the first object happened to get random value 0, then it's going to move to this position. If it gets random value 1, it's going to move to the second position, and so on. And once it's been moved to that position, we set the Boolean to say, nope, you're not allowed to go there anymore. This position is already filled. So that's what the Boolean is doing. And then we're going to send event -1. You'll notice that's right here. When event -1 is received, we set the total number of objects to be total objects -1. It's important to note that this is running inside of the if statement, because if we have a instance where this Boolean isn't true, we don't want it to subtract 1 until we've actually moved an object into position. So we don't want to accidentally say there's 1 less object than there actually is. Then at the very end, we send event next object to self with a delay of 0.1 seconds. So this gives the time for the if statements to run. So now if we come back up here, when next object runs again, we will have subtracted 1, but what if the Boolean was false? So say when we come through and do total object, or when total objects equals 2, or total objects equals 3 or 1, say it tries to move it to a position that is already set, because remember we're setting this random value, well, it's going to continue looping through this move object until we get the -1 event. Once we receive the -1 event, it's going to set that total objects to be the next object in motion and move on to the next one. And then when we reach total objects equals 0, we cancel sending event move object and we cancel sending event next object. And this is why it's so important to have move object at the top, because when move object is at the bottom, what it does is it does the opposite of this. Instead of, it like cancels it, but it's already sending it afterwards. So it's important to make sure that the sending of the event move object is at the top, so that way we can cancel it later when there's only 0 objects, when there's no objects left. All right, so that's how that works. It's pretty straightforward once you understand it, but it's just kind of looping in a cycle until it gets to the end. And just to kind of show you what it does, again, I'll stop and reset the world. And now you can see very quickly, and they're all in position. Pretty neat. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but I look forward to seeing the next one. Bye.